On June 7th, 2005, this officer received a call from dispatch at 0124 hours. I reported to the intersection of 8th and Burnside, the scene of an automobile collision. I arrived at the crash scene at 0138. I observed a late model, dark-colored Ford Explorer automobile on its roof. There appeared to be extensive damage to the Explorer. EMTs and firemen had recently arrived and were in the process of extricating the occupants of the Ford, vehicle number 1. Also in the intersection was a light-colored Lincoln Navigator, vehicle number 2, which had significant damage to the front of the vehicle. Standing next to vehicle 2, a man who stated he was the operator of vehicle number 2. His name was Dale Broadside, age 42. The first individual extracted from vehicle 1 was an 18-year-old female, one Sophie Davis. I attempted to interview her, but was unable to do so because of her hysterical state. She was screaming, crying, and attempting to get to the vehicle. She had to be forcibly restrained by an EMT. I was able to learn that she was in the front passenger seat when the accident occurred. I detected a strong odor of alcoholic beverage emanating from her. Her speech was slurred and not easily understood. Another individual removed from vehicle number 1 was sitting on a gurney provided by EMT. I was informed by the EMT that he appeared to have a broken leg and a broken collarbone. I spoke briefly with this individual. He stated he had no recollection of what happened at the accident. He identified himself as Kelly Garner, age 18. According to EMTs who extricated Garner, he was occupying the left rear seat of vehicle number 1 at the time of the collision. Another individual removed from vehicle number 1 was later identified as Ben Chase, age 18. He was apparently seated in the right rear passenger seat at the time of the collision. He was unconscious, and I was informed by the EMTs that he was awaiting a life flight to General Hospital. Lying next to the car was the operator of vehicle number 1, Jake Matthews. He appeared to be severely injured and was in a semi-conscious state at the time. I attempted to speak with him. However, he was crying, "I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs." I detected a very strong odor of alcoholic beverage emanating from Matthews. I interviewed Dale Broadside, operator of vehicle number 2, while standing by vehicle number 2. While talking to Broadside, I noticed a moderate smell of alcoholic beverage. He said that he had spent the evening with his girlfriend, Darla Royer, at 738 South Burnside. He admitted to consuming 2 glasses of wine earlier that evening, but denied having any more than that. I asked him if he would submit to a field sobriety test. He said he would. I then performed the HGN test, otherwise known as the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. Next, I asked him to perform the one-leg stand test and the heel-to-toe field sobriety test. Mr. Broadside completed the field sobriety tests without significant difficulty. When I asked him to describe how the accident occurred, he said he was approaching Burnside going northbound, and while entering the intersection with 8th, he put it, the car was just there. He said it was his recollection that the light was green when he entered the intersection for operators going north on Burnside. I asked him if he took any evasive action to avoid the collision. He shrugged and said, "I think the light was green. It all happened so fast." They were just there, you know. They were just there. When I asked about his speed, he said, "Truthfully, I was probably going 50 to 55 miles per hour. I especially noted that there were no skid marks or other indications that vehicle number 2 braked before the collision. Photographs were taken of the scene by Officer Thad Thomas, and these photographs are in the evidence room at the police station. There was also a news crew from Channel 5, Eyewitness News, who came on the scene soon after. While walking around the scene, I discovered a small handheld video recorder on the pavement. It was still operating at the time I picked it up. I turned it off and turned it over to our photo lab for inspection. The following day, I was informed that the recorder had actually recorded the accident. It's clear from the video recording that the operator of vehicle number 1 Jake Matthews, was distracted from observing the road ahead, and he failed to detect a red light at the intersection of 8th and Burnside. From later interviews, I was also able to determine that he was traveling at an excessive speed, probably 50 to 55 miles per hour. The speed limit for both 8th and Burnside at or near the intersection in question is 30 miles per hour. On June 13th, 2005, I interviewed Sophie Davis at her home in the presence of her parents. She was the girlfriend of Jake Matthews. The following are her statements. The event was graduation day for her and the other occupants of the vehicle. The 4 individuals in the vehicle spent the evening before the accident at a friend's house with members of the graduating class. The party took place at the home of classmate David Sickles, the son of Robert and Brenda Sickles. Everyone at the party was drinking both beer and shots of vodka. They were also playing beer pong. They left the party a little after 1 a.m. When they left the party, they were drunk. She said, very drunk. When asked if Jake Matthews was drunk, she replied, very. When asked if he would be permitted to drive the vehicle, she said, he, Jake Matthews, seemed like he was the least drunk of us. It was his car, and he always drove. I asked if Ben Chase was drunk. She replied, oh yeah. Vehicle 1 was traveling about 50 to 55 miles per hour. Mr. and Mrs. Sickles may or may not have been at the residence during the party. She said she couldn't remember them being there. She thought Mr. and Mrs. Sickles knew there was alcohol being served to minors at their home. They are currently persons of interest in the DA office. She said she didn't know who purchased the liquor, it was just there. On June 13th, I interviewed Kelly Garner. He was at his parents' home and in the presence of his mother at the time of the interview. He had a cast on his right leg and was in a sling. He also had a broken collarbone. He indicated the following. He said, I can't really say what happened. I really don't remember much about that. He nodded that he was at the party. When asked if he drank, he nodded affirmatively and said, a lot, probably 4 or 5 beers and several shots. He added, I'm not going to kid you. I was really messed up. I think we all were, to be honest with you. On June 16th, 2005, I attempted to interview Jake Matthews. He was in the intensive care unit at General Hospital. Present was his attorney, who indicated that he didn't think it would be a good idea for Mr. Matthews to be interviewed, both because of his physical and mental condition. He further informed me that Mr. Matthews had a severe head injury as a result of the accident. More significant was a severe spinal injury, which severed his spine in the lumbar region of his back. Mr. Matthews is paralyzed from the waist down, and according to his physicians, it is extremely unlikely that he will ever be able to use his lower limbs again. On June 21st, 2005, search warrants were obtained from the Honorable Daniel Burke. The search warrants, which are attached to this report, sought the autopsy report from Ben Chase, who died several hours after the accident, as well as the laboratory records from General Hospital with regard to the blood alcohol level of the other 3 occupants of the vehicle. A warrant was served the following day, and the records requested were obtained. The autopsy report of Ben Chase indicated that he died from blunt force injuries and contusions to the brain. He was unconscious at the time of the accident and never regained consciousness. Blood alcohol results indicate that his blood alcohol level was 0.28, over 3 times the legal driving limit. Blood alcohol level for the driver of Vehicle 1, Jake Matthews, was 0.27. Kelly Garner was 0.24. Sophie Davis was 0.27. Kelly Garner suffered a compound fracture of the tibia and a broken collarbone. Sophie Davis was diagnosed with 2 broken ribs and a number of lacerations. Ben Chase suffered severe brain contusions, which resulted in his death. Jake Matthews suffered from a severe concussion and contusions of the brain, as well as a fractured spine and severance of the spinal cord. This officer met with district attorney after the following and reviewing the facts as set forth in this affidavit, indicated that charges should be filed against various individuals as follows: Dale Broadside, speeding and careless driving; Jake Matthews, driving under the influence; involuntary manslaughter; homicide by vehicle; DUI related; failure to obey traffic signals; reckless driving; speeding; and underage consumption of alcohol. Sophie Davis, underage consumption of alcohol. Kelly Garner, underage consumption of alcohol. Robert and Brenda Sickles, involuntary manslaughter. I asked ADA Gall whether or not she could make the charges against Mr. and Mrs. Stickle-Stick. She stated absolutely. And as she put it, I think it's time we send a message to people who hold these parties in their homes. I think this couple was more responsible than any other person for this terrible tragedy. As submitted, Lieutenant Donald Rivetti, Municipal PD.
Officer, was this a difficult assignment for you in your several years' experience?
This was probably one of the most tragic automobile collisions and scenes of carnage that I've witnessed in my entire lifetime.
Do you have children?
I do.
Are they driving age?
They will be soon.
And do they go to are they in school?
They are currently in school, yes.
The Commonwealth and the government has no further questions. We will yield the witness to cross-examination. Thank you, officer.
Thank you.